Revealed, the incredible love that transformed a billionaire allergic to all women except her. Ethan Orwell stood at the edge of a shimmering crowd, the cacophony of industry titans and ambitious entrepreneurs swirling around him like a storm. He felt their eyes drift past him, seeking the next source of inspiration, as if he were merely a ghost haunting the periphery of Silicon Valley's grand narrative. The walls of his heart, reinforced by years of solitude, were impervious to any connection except perhaps the fleeting glance that found him amidst the chaos. It was there that he met Sarah, her presence radiating an unexpected warmth that clashed violently with his carefully built barriers. She moved through the crowd like she belonged to another world, one of books and dreams, while he was anchored to a realm of codes and stark numbers. In that instant, his mind raced, and a familiar unease crept in. What if she saw through his carefully crafted facade? What if she revealed the emptiness that lay beneath the surface of his billionaire empire? Ethan hesitated, recalling his childhood, how trust and intimacy had been synonyms for pain. He had woven himself into a tech fortress, shunning tenderness like a cat avoiding water. Unknown to him, from across the crowded hall, Sarah felt an electric pull, instinctively aware of the battle waging within him. She was drawn to his steely gaze that belied a depth of complexity. But for Ethan, confrontation sparked agitation. The closer they came to each other, the more he questioned his self-imposed exile. How could he allow someone into the hollowed chambers of his heart? How could he risk her laughter for the haunted memories that threatened his resolve? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment crumbled under the strain of their instant connection. As the conference churned on, Ethan mentally ripped at the fabric of his elitist existence. The turmoil escalated within him as he envisioned Sarah, her family, struggling to stay afloat. His gut twisted at the thought of offering help, true assistance, but the fear of judgment questioned every aspect of his desire to reach out. The divide between his wealth and her modesty loomed like an uncrossable canyon. Did he dare bridge that chasm, exposing himself to the very vulnerability he despised? Anguish swelled inside him. The knowledge that she could weather the storm on her own yet deserved better tormented him further. He could lift them up, yet he remained frozen in fear of what that generosity might entail, an unspoken contract that tied their paths together forever. Just as he toyed with the idea of breaking free from his self-imposed exile, a news alert pinged on his phone, an impending storm brewing in his meticulously controlled universe. His past, filled with trauma that threatened to eclipse his sanity, was about to be thrust into the light of public scrutiny. The clock ticked ominously towards an uncertain future, leaving Ethan torn between the urge to run and the overwhelming need to embrace the real emotions Sarah had awakened. How could he lay bare the secrets of his shattered soul when the winds of backlash threatened to sweep them apart? The clock ticked louder, each tick tossing him deeper into the depths of anguish, where love and fear collided in a dazzling, unbearable dance. Ethan stared at his phone, the screen illuminating the troubling news headline that bubbled forth invasive revelations, eager speculation, and whispers from the shadows of his past. The perfect storm was gathering, threatening to tear the fragile threads of control he had woven around himself. He could feel the panic rising like bile in his throat, choking out any rational thought. The imminent public exposure of his history clawed at him, threatening to expose not just his vulnerabilities but also every hand he had ever extended and every protective wall he had built that he retreated, looking for solace amidst the chaos. His mind raced as he sought an explanation for this sudden confrontation with his reality. Sarah was still there, an anchor in an overwhelming sea, though the implications of that connection frightened him further. How could she possibly understand the intricacies of his facade, the suffocating weight of expectation that came with his fortunes? Navigating through the crowd, he felt a sickening unrest in his stomach, one that had plagued him since he became a titan in tech. Always be prepared for the worst, his father had said, sealing his son's fate in glass and marble. Ethan had learned to thrive in the uncertainty of his industry, redirecting fear into calculated risks. But no amount of strategic planning could prepare him for the emotional unraveling he sensed closing in. Suddenly Sarah appeared beside him, her presence calming yet electrifying. "Are you all right?" she asked, genuine concern rippling through her voice. For a moment, Ethan faltered, caught in a moment of decision. Should he allow her to see the storm raging within? "Just processing everything," he replied, the automatic response laced with honesty he wasn't ready to confront. "You don't need to go through it alone, you know," she murmured, undeterred by his reticence, her bright gaze piercing through his defenses. A part of him yearned to reach out, to tear down the fortified walls and let her in, but the shadows of his past held him captive in fear. His upbringing had taught him to prioritize stoicism, to equate emotion with weakness. Now, with every passing second, his fear wrestled with an uncharted yearning to redefine relationships on his terms. Plagued by urgency, he found himself reflecting on the choices that had led him to this moment. Could this be his proverbial tipping point, the opportunity to evolve beyond his self-sufficiency? Amidst tumultuous emotions and zealous aspirations, he recalled his last moment of vulnerability, a failed relationship that left him hollow and raw, scars still fresh beneath the surface. What if letting Sarah in meant unleashing chaos once more? The risk felt too great, yet her gaze held an undeniable promise, a glimpse of something transformative, whether glorious or utterly disastrous. It ignited a yearning that set his heart racing, and for the first time in years, he contemplated unearthing the truth of himself, not just as a billionaire but as a man capable of genuine connection and perhaps love. As the noise around them faded into white noise, he felt the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. Would he gamble on the profound connection that tugged at his very essence, risking everything for a glimpse of authenticity? The choice lay before him: fight his demons or embrace the potential of a future unbounded by fear. Just then, another ping broke through the haze, his phone vibrating incessantly as new notifications flooded in. Headlines exploded with speculations about what he had tried so hard to keep buried. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Ethan's gaze flickered to Sarah, her steadfast presence igniting an ember of determination. He grasped for clarity, the urge to confront the darkness growing stronger. The time had come to face not just the outside world, but his most formidable opponent, his past. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he felt the pressure of the moment close in on him. The relentless vibration of his phone felt like an alarm clock breaking an extended silence, rousing him from a comfortable stupor into the cold light of reality. The headlines creeping toward publication threatened to expose all facets of his existence. Internally, he questioned everything. Why had he let his guard drop? Why had he opened himself up to Sarah when the stakes had never been higher? The connection he felt with her was intoxicating, and yet it terrified him. They stood away from the crowd's turmoil, isolated in a moment that felt both pivotal and misplaced. What would happen if the world learned of the boy behind the billionaire? Would they see his struggles, his vulnerabilities, or would they simply revel in the sensation of tearing him down? "Ethan," Sarah's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts, a gentle reminder of what was more tangible than the looming headlines. "What are you thinking?" His gaze fell to the floor, and the familiar weight of stoicism settled in. He paused, weighing his options carefully. Would opening up to her be a leap into oblivion or a step toward redemption? He felt the fight within him stirring, grappling with a lifetime of learned defenses. "I'm thinking that I've built my whole life around control," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every partnership, every contract, it's all been about controlling the narrative, about protecting myself." Then why not rewrite that narrative? Her challenge held a spark of inspiration, evoking a flicker of hope from deep within him. Could he reclaim his story? He considered the cascading timelines of his life, how without realizing it, he de-woven an existence defined by guardedness. Clarity surged through him as the need for authenticity, for living in truth rather than fear, became imperative. His thoughts raced. What if he could pivot this moment? He sensed an almost magnetic pull toward a new path. "I don't want to hide anymore," he breathed, the admission shocking even himself. A breeze swept through, ruffling the edges of his stress and carrying away traces of his hesitation. For the first time, he wanted to confront his past, not just the headlines but the emotional baggage that accompanied it, the shame that suffocated him. "Then let us not," Sarah said, her voice unwavering, a stark contrast to the fading anxieties in his gut. "We face it together." He locked eyes with her, the warmth of her gaze igniting something within. But as he contemplated the very nature of their confrontation, would she still feel that way when the secrets began to fly? Before he could utter a response, the vibration of his phone became relentless, each buzz a reminder of the mounting pressure to choose between silence or engagement. Taking a deep breath, Ethan's fingers fumbled, and before he fully processed the implications, he opened a notification. The screen displayed an article with more heated speculation: "Billionaire CEO in controversial relationship, who's the mystery woman?" The urgency of the situation could no longer be denied. The irony of his last words echoed in his mind. He wanted to live in truth, yet here he stood, clinging to his hidden past. His decision crystallized a gamble on authenticity against years of deflection. If he chose to embrace this chaos, what chains would fall away? Would he emerge reborn, or would the tumult pull him back into the shadows he fought so hard to escape? The moment slipped from his grasp like time itself as he felt Sarah's steadfast presence beside him, a beacon. Just then, a sudden realization hit him like a bolt of electricity. What if the approaching storm could serve not to destroy him but to uncover a strength he never knew he possessed? The potency of this decision surged through him. With the storm brewing outside, Ethan faced the dual challenge: confront his past in a world that demanded perfection, or to risk everything and forge a path toward truth. But before he could fully articulate that decision, another notification broke through with harrowing finality. Details of an upcoming exposé were poised to drop, and Ethan understood he was on the precipice of revelation. With Sarah by his side, would he stand tall against the waves crashing toward him, or yield to the tides of his past? The edges of his resolve sharpened, and the stakes had never been higher. As Ethan met Sarah's gaze, a mixture of fear and determination lit inside him. The truth was standing right at the door, demanding entry, demanding acknowledgement. And he knew, with reckless certainty, that the time had come not just to face his critics but to truly confront himself. Ethan felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on him as he stood beside Sarah, the world seemingly shrinking around them. The sound of yet another buzzing notification sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. Each buzz was a reminder that chaos was not just approaching, it was already here. He could feel his pulse quicken. There was no turning back now that he had spent years shrouded in a veil of protection, building walls to guard against both external judgment and internal vulnerability. But now, confronted by Sarah's unwavering gaze, the fabric of his defenses began to unravel. Would releasing the past truly allow him to reclaim his life? "Let us go," Sarah said, breaking the silence that had engulfed them. Her eyes were filled with an intensity that inspired Ethan to follow where hope dared to tread. They began moving, the sounds of the bustling world fading into a background hum as adrenaline overtook his senses. "Together," she repeated, grasping his hand, instilling a sense of solidarity that bolstered his anxieties. The warmth of her grip ignited a newfound determination. In that moment, he realized how entangled their journeys had become. Could vulnerability be his path to liberation? Could he divulge the very things that made him feel less than whole? As they walked, Ethan contemplated the implications of this decision. The weight of potential fallout was immense, but the urge to forge a new narrative, the narrative of a man willing to embrace his imperfections, pulled him closer to a sense of clarity. Facing the cameras, the pens, the judgment was terrifying, yet letting go of the control he had been so desperately clinging to felt even more frightening. The street ahead transformed into a blur of color and sound. Each step felt heavier as the realization of exposure loomed. He recalled the stark labels: billionaire, CEO, and now in a controversial relationship. Would he remain just the caricature, or could he humanize the narrative? He feared being reduced to a headline that failed to capture the essence of who he was. "I want the world to see me for who I really am," he whispered, breaking the silence that hung heavily between them. "What if they don't understand?" Sarah asked gently, her fears mirroring his own. "Then I have to find a way to make them see," he responded, his resolve building with every word. "To show them I'm more than just my wealth or my mistakes." They arrived at a park, the gentle rustling of leaves offering an unexpected comfort. He and Sarah sat on a weathered bench, where the tranquility of the environment contrasted sharply with the turbulence inside him. "Sometimes," he started, his voice shaky but firm, "the hardest part isn't revealing the truth. It's believing that the truth is enough." Ethan's thoughts circled around the belief that authenticity was tied to acceptance and connection. He had no way of knowing how the world would receive his truth, yet the prospect of hiding any longer felt increasingly untenable. This wrestling match within was not just about him, it was about validation in a world that thrived on judgment. As Sarah sat beside him, the solidity of her presence became a sanctuary from the chaos swirling in his mind. With her encouragement, Ethan envisioned speaking openly, discussing his past relationships, his failures, his triumphs, and the things that haunted him nightly. But as they discussed what his announcement would entail, another notification pierced through their moment of introspection. The headline appeared, a stark reminder that time was running short, Ethan Adams to break silence and exclusive. With a dawning realization, he understood that he was not just facing the world, he was stepping into a transformative moment of self-reckoning. The pieces of his past were spilling forth, and this offered a chance to rebuild not just himself but the essence of who he wanted to be. Ethan took a deep breath, the path of openness stretching before him like an unpaved road full of uncertainty. Would he embrace the true potential of this moment, or would fear deter him into the shadows? As they stood to leave the park, Ethan felt the echoes of his old self fading beneath the whisper of hope. He had a choice to make, and it was more confrontational than any board meeting or business deal: face his truths or allow them to remain hidden. Just before stepping away from the bench, Ethan cast one last glance at Sarah, whose unwavering support rooted him in the present. What if I finally stood my ground? He thought that in that instant, he knew the magnitude of the change that awaited him. He was on the brink of something monumental, a revelation that felt both exhilarating and terrifying, because the moment approached where Ethan would have to finally choose between the comforts of his past and the unpredictable promise of his future. What awaited him, however, was not just professional exposure but a deeply personal awakening, one that could shatter his fortress or reshape it into something more profound. The storm might be raging, but Ethan could feel the first rain of transformation begin to fall. Would he have the courage to allow it to wash away the remnants of his former self? As Ethan stepped away from the bench, a weightlessness washed over him, momentarily lifting the burden of insecurity and fear that had hovered for so long. The park, with its vibrant colors and gentle breeze, felt like an echo of the life he wanted, one that wasn't shackled by expectations or cloaked in a false persona. Yet, as he and Sarah walked back toward the hustle and bustle of the city, his confidence began to flicker like a flame in the wind. What would happen when the announcement dropped? Would the world perceive the real Ethan, or would they dismiss him as just another billionaire seeking attention amidst scandal? There's no going back, he reminded himself, trying to clutch the resolve that had begun to dissipate with every stride. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah's voice was steady, imbued with a sincerity that urged him to confront his fears rather than retreat. The honesty of her question struck deep. "Ready isn't the word," he admitted, his mind racing ahead to the possible misinterpretations of his truth. "But I know I can't keep hiding. Not anymore." His earlier bravado seemed to ebb, giving way to self-doubt. What did it mean to be authentic? He had always been touted as a titan of industry, a visionary, but there was no chart or reference point for vulnerability. Upon reaching his office, an oasis of relentless ambition, the very walls he had built around himself began to shrink. Each step toward the boardroom felt like crossing into enemy territory. Behind those polished doors sat his colleagues, stakeholders waiting to exploit his vulnerabilities or, worse, reduce him to a punchline. He fought against the wave of anxiety that threatened to cloud his determination. Seated around the conference table, the discussions unfolded, but Ethan's mind lingered on the impending moment he would face the world no longer protected by layers of wealth and reputation. Every word from his advisors felt muted, a distant hum compared to the loud clamor of his own thoughts. He caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the glass window, a man standing at the precipice of transformation. "Ethan, you're with us." A voice pulled him back, a sharp reminder of where he was. "We need your input on the upcoming launch." He took a deep breath, summoning the remnants of that earlier conviction. "Let us take a moment," he decided, unable to ignore the dampened spirits threading through the room. He sensed a unique opportunity. Curiosity crackled in the silence that followed. "I want to talk about something important, something more than just business." Their expressions shifted, a mixture of intrigue and concern. The table energy shifted as he met their gazes squarely and spoke. "I've always prided myself on hard work and achievement, but it's time I share a side of me that's been hidden." He felt the tremor of uncertainty in his voice, but if there was any chance to be seen for who he truly was, he needed to take this leap. "I'm not just my title, and I don't want to be known just for my successes. I am more than my business acumen. I'm human, flawed, and ready to embrace those imperfections." Each confession to his team was like peeling back layers. He risked being perceived as weak, but he also sensed an unexpected clarity in their eyes bloom, gradually curiosity intertwining with respect. "The world outside is quick to judge, but I choose authenticity over perfection," he continued. "I believe it's time for the truth." The silence that followed was heavy, but he clung to the hope that it represented something foundational, a break from the norms of corporate rigidity that drenched his life. They weren't accustomed to this Ethan, vulnerable, raw, and unguarded. But there it was, a flicker of fire ignited in his spirit. Finally, a breath of exhilaration rushed in, invigorated by the thought of owning his narrative. He considered the impending announcement, feeling the storm still raging, yet less afraid of its onslaught. What if this is my path to true connectivity? He wondered, a thought that sent shivers of anticipation down his spine. When the meeting broke, Ethan stepped out of the boardroom, his heart beating not from fear but anticipation. He was taking control not just professionally, but personally. Perhaps he was not only ready to reveal himself but to redefine who he wanted to be in a world quick to categorize. As he ventured back into the hustle of the city, vibrancy surged through his veins. Just then, a notification interrupted his thoughts, a reminder of the expectation tethering him to the past. Ethan Adams, an exclusive interview. An interview where he would confront the dark corners of his past. Could this truly solidify the new foundation I seek, or am I simply stepping into the lion's den? The question echoed, charged with possibility but laced with apprehension. But he knew he was no longer just the guarded businessman, he was also a man driven by passion and the desire for reclamation. How far would he go to set himself free? Would he continue marching into the fray or gradually retreat to the safety of the shadows? He felt an electric pulse of uncertainty as he prepared for what lay ahead, a chase not just for success but for redemption. The moment was approaching, an undefined threshold into uncharted territories, paving the path toward a confrontation he had always avoided. But now, it seemed inevitable. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he falter under the weight of the truth demanding to be acknowledged? Ethan glanced at the notification on his phone, heart pounding in rhythm with the distorting anticipation coursing through him. The interview title smacked of sensationalism, an explosion of subtext haunting him as much as it provoked curiosity. Was this a moment of empowerment or an invitation to further scrutiny? Settling into a corner booth in a quaint cafe across the street, he sifted through the noise of the bustling city. He was wrestling with conflicting emotions, a momentum igniting his self-acceptance, yet a dread of exposure tightened around him like a vice. The sunlight filtering through the window cast a warm glow, illuminating yellowed pages of his past. He'd always buried them in shadow, a deliberate act of self-preservation. His resolve began to wobble as he pondered the powerful voices echoing in his head. What if they uncovered the insecurities that lay beneath his polished exterior? What if they amplified the stories he didn't want told, the scars of failures and regrets? Yet, over that din, Sarah's earlier question reverberated, imploring him to breach that self-imposed wall. He was out of alignment with himself, and accounting of successes had come at the cost of honest connections, strangled by a veneer of wealth. That could no longer be his operating principle. Identity reformulation demanded confrontation, it wouldn't be sustainable to skirt around truths while cultivating an image he no longer recognized. Ethan opened his notebook, a habit he'd long dismissed in the rush of meetings and deals. Pensively, he jotted down thoughts, unlocking fragments of realization. "Who am I beyond the billion-dollar deals?" he wrote at the top. A trickle of confidence emerged, the ink foreshadowing an awakening. He considered the interviews he'd resented in the past, how they had always revolved around profit margins and stock prices. But wasn't the real story buried just beneath? Suddenly, inspiration struck his discomfort and the spotlight transformed into an opportunity. This interview wasn't simply a platform for complaints about misunderstandings, it could function as a narrative anchor that encompassed his evolution while embracing authenticity. He envisioned a dialogue that'd propel the spotlight from misjudgments toward a complex, real human experience, yet, even if he aimed for sincerity, the nagging itch of producing an engaging story gnawed at him. A heightened expectation loomed. What if he was simply a caricature of a businessman stepping into self-revelation? Would this validate his courage or serve as fodder for snarky headlines? Determined to channel that energy differently, Ethan recalled the faces of his colleagues in the boardroom, their surprise flickering into respect. They'd witnessed his personal metamorphosis, a glimpse behind the curtain that swept away the allure of binary success or failure. It was a cycle of evolution he could harness instead of shying away from. Gripping the pen tightly, he turned inward, scribbling down the components of his journey, pivotal learning moments, missed connections, and newfound passions. These reflections birthed experiences he could weave into the upcoming interview, elements that could resonate with others grappling with their own battles. Suddenly, the potential for connectivity sparked a sense of clarity that lulled his doubts, but in that moment of optimism, a sobering reality returned. How would the public respond to this new narrative? Would they grant him the same understanding Sarah had? There lay a precarious balance between vulnerability and authenticity. As he scribbled the last notes, the weight of expectation re-emerged, fed by the ever-tightening grip of publicity. As he prepared for the interview, sharpening his messages, an unsettling thought bubbled to the surface: shared truths often invite judgment. Did he still possess the fortitude to lay bare parts of himself that had languished for too long, risked being misunderstood? His phone buzzed once more, revealing the interviewer's name, an unexpected someone known for unflinching inquiry. Unease crept back, gnawing at the determination he fought to cultivate. This would be no ordinary exchange. Walls were set to shatter. It pressed intrusively against his chest, a test of vulnerability waiting to unfold. Was he equipped to embrace the turbulence that loomed ahead? The air felt heavier as shadows from his past threatened to resurface, teasing missteps and refracted perceptions. Every instinct urged him to reconsider, yet the flame of desire for freedom sparked within, throbbing a desperate call for honesty amid chaos. The time had come to face those jagged edges of his identity, and as he prepared to step into the lion's den, a lingering question haunted him. Would unveiling his truth usher in liberation, or would it invite a reckoning he wasn't fully prepared for? With a last deep breath, Ethan steadied himself. The interview lay ahead, a convergence of consequences and opportunity wedged between hope and dread. Would this be the threshold into liberation, or the void where he risked losing everything? Courage tinged with trepidation swirled inside him, and as he firmly entered the new chapter of his life, he knew this was merely the beginning. As Ethan stepped into the interview space, the air shimmered with tension and expectancy. The sleek modern office, filled with bold colors and minimalist designs, mirrored his internal struggle, a juxtaposition of clarity and chaos. He could see the large video camera aimed directly at him, its lens an unblinking eye determined to capture every nuance of his psyche. The interviewer, a determined and incisive figure known for their tough, uncompromising style, stood waiting with an unyielding expression. Ethan's heart raced, not just from nerves but from an intoxicating sense of challenge. This was his moment to transform vulnerability into strength. He was stepping into uncharted territory, a space that would demand authenticity yet risk exposure. They began with surface-level questions about corporate achievements, a familiar territory. Ethan answered with practiced ease, listing impressive statistics and accolades. But a tightening in his throat reminded him this was not the discourse he wanted. He was no longer that man, that facade crafted solely for admiration. He shifted, committed to delivering a different narrative. "Let us talk about failure," he said, surprising even himself. The interviewer raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He continued, speaking of a deal that had collapsed under the weight of his overconfidence, a missed opportunity that gnawed at him even now. As he addressed his mistakes, the liberation derived from acknowledging imperfections seeped through him. Vulnerability felt strangely exhilarating. "What did that teach you?" The interviewer probed, their voice tinged with curiosity. "That humility is a more potent teacher than success. I realized it's the moments of struggle that shape us," he replied, his voice steadier. For the first time, he felt the truth in his words resonate beyond the studio walls. As the discussion turned deeper, Ethan began to open up about the emotions tangled within his life's trajectory, the isolation cloaked in wealth, the void where genuine connections should have dwelled. Bitter regret seeped into his story, revealing glimpses of the man who buried himself in work as a distraction from the complexities of his heart. Questions about relationships led him to stumble upon the painful truth that had long lay hidden. "I've built walls around myself," he confessed, "not just to keep others out, but to protect myself from vulnerability." A moment of silence settled. Ethan felt exposed. Would this honesty cultivate understanding or fuel scrutiny? "Why now?" The interviewer pressed, her intensity matched only by her compassion. "Because I've realized that who we are is not defined solely by our successes," Ethan found himself saying, "but by how we navigate our failures and connect with others. I want to embrace that connection." Before he could second-guess himself, he shared the pivotal moment of realization. Sarah, the woman who saw him beyond the billionaire persona, who sparked a desire for authenticity in him. Their encounter had awakened something dormant, a longing for genuine connection, and felt like the first step towards unraveling the tightly wound thread of his past. Despite the initial hesitation, a sense of courage surged through him. He savored the connection in the discomfort, the revelation that acceptance, not just self-acceptance, but acceptance from others, was possible. He embraced the notion that his vulnerabilities could enhance, rather than diminish, his story. As the interview wound towards a close, the interviewer leaned in, her voice softer yet probing. "If you could communicate one message to your audience, what would it be?" Ethan paused, the weight of this question significant. "That it's okay to be seen. It's okay to fail. It's okay to be real. The true measure of success is not in how many victories we claim, but in how we endure our struggles and grow through them. Find your people, let them in." With that, he felt the walls around his heart shake, cracks forming where he had once fortified against the world. He could almost taste liberation, the distinct flavor of honesty, intermingling with the thrill of new beginnings. Yet, as he departed the interview, an unsettling thought echoed: would this newfound candor invite a reckoning, or would it be the catalyst for something transformative? The thrill of possibility mingled with the apprehension of backlash, a tumultuous mixture swirling inside him. With one last deep breath, Ethan stepped out of the building, instinctively pulling his coat tighter against the chill of the street. He knew a pivotal moment awaited him, one that would challenge the very essence of who he had become and who he aspired to be. The question lingered in his mind: if vulnerability invited growth, was he ready to embrace whatever came next? Would he indeed find the courage to unravel his truth before an audience still waiting to judge? Ethan walked away from the building, his breath misting in the cold air, thoughts racing ahead of him like wild horses. The interview had shaken the very foundation of his carefully constructed facade. He felt raw yet undeniably liberated. He had anticipated applause, accolades, and the reassuring nods of his peers, but had instead unearthed a vulnerability that unsettled him. Confronted by his own truth, he began to question what lay beneath his powerhouse persona. That he moved through the bustling city streets, the world around him a dizzying blur of threat and opportunity. Each person he passed seemed to have a story, a layer of complexity he once brushed aside, convinced that their narratives paled in comparison to his corporate achievements. Yet now, he wondered, did anyone see the man behind the successful image? The echoes of his revelations followed him, whispering doubts in his ear. What if he had just made a grave mistake? There was power in vulnerability, yes, but also a risk. Opening up could lead to rejection, judgment, or worse, pity. With each step, his heart thundered faster. Transformative moments often carried weighty consequences. Ethan's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. It was Sarah. The connection they shared resurfaced, intertwining with his doubts. Her laughter, her insight, her capacity to see beyond his wealth and status had unearthed a yearning in him he couldn't ignore. In their conversations, he felt a mirror had been held up to his life, reflecting not just his choices, but the profound silence echoing in the absence of true companionship. Suddenly, a sense of urgency gripped him. He needed to talk to her. He thumbed the screen, hesitating only for a second before typing a simple message: "Can we meet? I need to talk." Immediately, he hit send, unsure if he should feel excitement or dread. What could their encounter reveal? Would she see the fracture of his previous solitude as liberating, or would it provoke an aversion to his honest confrontation of self? As he approached his apartment, dimly lit and sparse, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. Once, it had felt like a throne constructed from success, the kingdom of a king. But now, every corner echoed loneliness. The plush furniture and state-of-the-art technology seemed trivial in face of his yearning for connection. Ethan dropped his keys on the polished table, letting the hollow sound reverberate through the empty space. He turned on the lights, illuminating the space while casting shadows on memories he'd rather forget. The accolades lining the walls now felt like chains, anchoring him to a past that lacked depth. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, envisioning Sarah's warm smile. She was more than an escape from solitude, she represented a fundamental shift within himself. Was he prepared to allow her to see this new version of himself, one stripped bare of pretense? As he deliberated, a dull ache of panic began to stir in his chest. What if his decision to embrace vulnerability pushed her away? Was he ready to let go of the control he clung to for so long? In the following moments, Ethan steeled himself, driven by a newfound resolve. He was determined to confront not only Sarah but the shadows within himself. He dared to imagine a future shaped not by success alone but by authentic connections with others, ones that would demand him to be seen fully, flaws and all. The ring of his phone interrupted his thoughts. Sarah's name illuminated the screen. Adrenaline surged through him, a blend of anticipation and dread. He pressed accept, heart hammering. Ethan, her voice flowed through the receiver, rich in concern and warmth. "Sarah, he started, but the words knotted in his throat. This was the moment. This was the time to embrace the truth he had sought for so long. But was it too late to type the message of opening his heart, or would she herald a new beginning? He could feel the weight of his decision teetering on the brink of the unknown, ready to tumble into a possibility that could redefine everything. Would he find the courage to share his vulnerabilities, or was he poised on the edge of another devastating collapse? "Ethan," Sarah spoke through the line, gently coaxing the tension from his clenched thoughts. "Hey, Sarah. Thanks for calling so quickly." His voice barely masked the tremor hiding beneath its surface. He paced the room like a wild animal in a cage, fighting the urge to retreat into the familiar safety of his facade. This was uncharted territory, and each heartbeat reminded him of the stakes involved. "Of course. I was just thinking about you. You seemed really deep in thought during our last conversation. What's on your mind?" The sincerity in her question pierced through the clamor of his doubts, urging him toward honesty. But vulnerability was a feat he had avoided for too long. He could feel every expectation, every reputation he had built around himself tightening into a noose, the weight of it becoming unbearable. Did he truly want to let those walls down? He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think I need a moment to be real with you. Ethan, you can talk to me about anything," she encouraged softly. The invitation was a balm, yet it stoked his fears. What if sharing his inner tumult scared her away? What if she didn't want to peel back the layers he had so meticulously constructed? "I find myself questioning everything, my life, my choices." He let the confession tumble out unexpectedly, as if grappling with a secret that had long festered beneath the surface. "The interview, it forced me to confront parts of myself I've hidden. And now I feel lost. I don't know who I am outside all this." he waved a hand around his apartment, as though it could convey all that he felt. Silence enveloped them for a moment, and he feared her reaction. Would she dismiss him, pity him? How could he explain the fear of losing his safe, comfortable empire while yearning for connection? I know this isn't easy for you, Sarah finally replied, her voice steady and calm. But, honestly, facing uncertainty can lead to powerful change. You've reached a point in your life that many never experience, a chance to redefine who you are. Her words felt like a glimmer, an outline of a possibility he had scarcely allowed himself to consider. It was evident that she saw the man behind the polished executive. She recognized the struggle. Did that mean he could be both vulnerable and successful? As they talked, he carefully dissected the remnants of his identity, reflecting on the discontent that had clouded his happiness despite financial success. Each revelation drew him closer to a new understanding: his accomplishments were not a measure of his worth. He could let his authentic self take the stage, commit to uncharted emotional depths without the crutch of status. Sarah, I appreciate you being here. You make it easier to confront these fears. He felt the warmth of the connection growing, but still, a flicker of doubt hovered. Was just saying those words enough? Was he ready not only to confront his own fears but to embrace what sharing them with her entailed? Just take it step by step, she reassured him again. You're on the cusp of something transformative. What are your biggest fears right now? He inhaled, considering the truth of her question. A whirlwind of thoughts surged through him: fear of judgment, of losing people who didn't accept the real Ethan, and the paralyzing dread of failure breeding in the unfamiliar territory he now faced. But deep within, a strange excitement brewed, the thrill of growth, the possibility of self-reclamation. I fear I'll lose my control, he admitted, voice shaking. What if vulnerability means losing everything I thought I built? What if I can't go back? Maybe control was never yours to begin with. Her response sent a jolt through him, planting seeds of contemplation. With their conversation stretching into the night, Sarah's presence felt like a guiding light. Every word she uttered opened new doors, yet with every revelation about himself, a growing urgency to embrace this transformative journey bubbled forth. Reflecting back on that concept of control, he realized the most vital initiative lay not in power but in authentic connection. Could he truly embrace this new direction? What was the first step towards letting go of control? As thoughts raced through his mind, another hint of panic rose. What would become of him now that he'd begun to unearth these hidden pieces of self? Ethan. Sarah's voice broke his reverie, bringing him back to the present. Yeah. Promise me that you'll explore these feelings. Don't just lock them away again. His pulse quickened, the challenge rang clear and made his stomach twist with both fear and determination. Okay, I promise. Yet as those words left his lips, a nagging doubt surfaced: would he find the courage to honor that promise, or would the ghost of his former self drag him back into darkness before he could truly step into the light? The weight of decision loomed, a palpable tension as he remained on the brink of discovery. In those depths lay the potential for rebirth or the threat of regression. What would this next step entail? He had opened a door, now, he just had to be brave enough to walk through it. The day dawned bright and clear, showering Silicon Valley in golden sunlight, a stark contrast to the tumult swirling in Ethan Orwell's mind. He stood before the expansive glass window of his penthouse office, a refuge lined with accolades that had once defined him. No longer. Today was different. Today, as he prepared to unveil his deepest truths, he felt the weight of his past transform into a rallying cry for authenticity. His gaze drifted beyond the horizon into the sprawling city below, where dreams collided with reality every single day. There, among the thousands, were individuals wrestling with their own identities, each yearning for validation, connection, and the courage to reveal their true selves. Just like him, Ethan took one last breath, his heart steadying as the knockout punch of vulnerability began to buffer against his earlier fears. He had shared his intentions with Sarah just the night before it was time to embrace the uncertainty that came with his truth, to show the world the man beneath the billionaire mask. The decision had not come easily. It required a monumental shift in perspective. Ethan had spent years guarding against exposure. Now, he would lean into it. The interview he had dreaded became less about the potential backlash and more about the opportunity to reshape his narrative, a grand reveal that could liberate him from the shackles of expectation. He had taken the first step toward acknowledging his past failures, and with that admission, he felt the facade begin to crack. This was not merely a platform for explanation, but a chance to transform the conversation surrounding him. The moment arrived as he sat in front of the camera, the same unyielding interviewer now seated across from him. Only this time, he wasn't merely a figure, he was a man with a story that demanded to be shared. As the recording began, he found clarity within the chaos. "I've hidden behind wealth and achievements for too long," he stated, his voice resonating throughout the studio, "and now it's time to dismantle that wall." He spoke candidly about the pressures of success, the loneliness that accompanied his rise, and the emotional burdens he had carried, disclosing the myriad of ways he had cloaked his vulnerabilities. The camera captured his transformation, and he could feel the energy shift in the room, a pull toward honesty that captivated not only his interviewer but viewers far beyond the glass walls. "It's in our failures that we learn about our true character," he declared with newfound conviction. The pause that followed hung in the air like a monument to his transformation, and as he channeled the emotional honesty, Ethan peered into the eyes of the interviewer, a strange connection beginning to form. There was no judgment, only empathy, as if she, too, was witnessing his metamorphosis. As the discussion turned to Sarah, he felt a swell of recognition. "It took facing the possibility of genuine connection for me to look at myself," he admitted. "Being with her helped me realize the flaws I had avoided, and for the first time, I'm ready to embrace both what I have accomplished and what I've lost." Finishing the interview, he felt an exhilarating sense of liberation sweep over him. The world would know him not just as a billionaire but as someone who had faced his deepest fears. He had chosen to live in truth, a profound transformation from the boy who once faced each day engulfed in silence and shame. Stepping out into the open air, Ethan felt alive. No longer was he tethered by an identity defined unjustly by wealth and status. He had proven to himself that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength. He was no longer just a billionaire CEO, he was Ethan Orwell, a man ready to embrace all that it meant to live in authenticity. Sending a message to Sarah as he walked through the bustling streets, his fingertips danced across the screen with renewed enthusiasm. "Let us meet. I want to celebrate this new life together." As the notification sent, a lightness surrounded him. The thrill of possibility ignited. He carried himself confidently, open to the uncertain yet exhilarating future ahead. With the rain of transformation pouring down, Ethan was ready to thrive, navigating through life with a resilience fortified by self-acceptance. Today marked the day he conquered his darkness, emerging into the light, fully prepared to engage with the world on his own terms. It was finally time to reveal the true Ethan. The future was not just waiting for him, with open arms, it invited him forth. And now, you need to subscribe immediately to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that reshape perceptions and lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for the journey of personal overcoming. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to embrace their own transformation. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel and all the impactful narratives unfolding before us.